Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in. Well, welcome back, listeners. We have a really exciting episode for you today. I'm Elizabeth, as you all know, and I'm excited to bring Erik here with us today. He is someone that is near and dear to my heart. I get to spend one afternoon with him every month for a leadership program called Leadership Link, and it's really exciting and has been really inspirational for me. So I'm excited to have him share with you and hopefully inspire you around the leadership topic as well. So before we get into kind of the conversation with you, Erik, I want to pass it over to Morgan because you finished our last episode asking a question. And I'm curious if you can just ask that question again, and then maybe Erik can give us a little bit of his insights.
Yeah, certainly. Well, welcome, Erik. We're very excited to have you on our team for today's podcast.
Thanks
and a little insight onto the last podcast's end question, which was me challenging our listeners to look a little bit into the great man theory of leadership versus the skills-based theory of leadership. So the great man theory in essence is that only certain people can become leaders based off of their traits, personality, et cetera, et cetera. The skills-based theory, meanwhile, is focused on, as it's stated, skills. So hard skills, soft skills, that skills can be developed. Erik, does one of those resonate with you?
Yeah, with my background, I was in the Marine Corps. So when I got there, they develop everybody as a leader. Whether you have people report into you or not. So their philosophy is something I still believe in, which is the same thing for the entire military right now, that everyone can be a leader. It's a concept that internally I've looked at more on that skills side, which would be inclusive leadership, include everybody in leadership development. I don't believe that there's natural born leaders. Certainly when I was born, the doctor didn't hand me over to my mom and said, hey, we got a leader here. I believe that as human beings, I believe that we have the ability to learn, some better than others, but leadership is a learned philosophy. It's a learned concept, and that's why there's different leadership styles. So I believe that every single person in an organization can think and act like leaders without anybody even reporting into them. So I'm all about the all-inclusive leadership model.
Yeah, great. That's what Elizabeth talking with her kind of sounded like. You might resonate more so with the skills-based theory. I agree with you in the sense of, multiple people can act as leaders, not necessarily being a leader, but there is that challenge of the great man theory. And, Elizabeth and I will get to that a little bit later on, but I want to hear a little bit about your experience, Erik, transitioning from, U.S. Marine Corps to a business professional.
Sure. I enlisted in 87. So I was 17 and a half when I enlisted. And then I had to finish high school. And then I was in what they called the delayed entry program. So I had to graduate high school. And then 3 weeks after I turned 18, I shipped out for boot camp. And what was interesting about the military was everything happens that you think is going to happen. There was yelling and screaming and in boot camp, of course, just the onboarding phase, but there was all the things that you thought of: rifle training, obstacle courses, a lot of running, sleepless nights, the whole 9 yards. All that training was there. But I think the thing that surprised me the most about the military was their focus on leadership development. They started it realistically, even before we went in boot camp. They started planting leadership seeds as you're meeting with your recruiter. They start talking about leadership, and then in boot camp, they start developing you as a leader. They start giving you the traits and the principles of what's expected. Then after boot camp, you go to your school for your MOS or your job. Mine was air traffic control. They're continuing to build you as a leader. Then you go to the fleet and you work in the Marine Corps, and I worked in a tower controlling traffic, still developed as a leader. Then finally, when you're promoted to a corporal position or a non-commissioned officer, an NCO, and you have some people that report into you, you know how to lead them. And so when I left the Marines in 91, just after the first Gulf War ended, I found there was a major leadership deficit in the civilian sector. They talk about it. They'll say leadership's important to us, but they have little to no leadership development happening consistently. So they have good intentions, but where I feel that a lot of my success came in, even in film school or working in the media world or now as a coach, was just teaching people how, not just the importance of leadership, but how do you actually do it? And that really led to the development of not only my leadership book, The Leadership Connection, but programs like our 4-part series or our Leadership Link program that Elizabeth is in, or we have a leadership cohesion program. It led to saying, here's how to do it. Because I think that's missing. I think the leadership how is missing in most organizations, even though they'll say, why is leadership important? Well, it's important because we impact people. Well, how do you do it? Well, I don't know. So I feel that I help to answer the how of leadership.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point, Erik, because there's a lot of statistics and everything out there, and I think maybe I even referenced it in a previous episode, but there's a lot of executive leaders, right? Leaders in title right now that feel they don't have a really strong leadership bench. Like the majority feel like they don't have a bench. And it makes me think that it's kind of a little bit of a cycle, right? Maybe they didn't receive the proper leadership training, but they have risen through the ranks, right? And rightfully so. I'm sure they're very successful. But that cycle continues. If you don't know how to develop leaders, how are you as a leader going to develop your bench, right? And then how are they going to develop their bench as time progresses? And I just think that it's a good point, is kind of that how is not always there. And that's really what people are looking for, you know?
Yeah. So Elizabeth, funny enough, this is something I hear a lot is, well, nobody taught me.
Right.
I hear that coming out of people is, well, nobody trained me. Nobody taught me how to be a leader or to do this job. I would expect that they're able to, in essence, teach themselves. If I was able to teach myself, well, not everybody has that capability. And also, expectation-wise, you need to develop that person to meet the expectations that you're inputting onto them, right? And so, a lot of people don't know the how portion of leadership because they weren't developed, so they don't know a system in which to develop others. And that's something that we have to fight against, is not just leadership development, but professional development even. They
need to, because there's a difference between training and development. Most people don't understand that, they're to a certain extent, they cross over, but they're polar opposites. We want to train people to know their jobs better. We want to develop people to know people better. So that leadership development component actually assists them with doing what they're trained to do. Whether I was an air traffic controller or I was running a media company, there was training I received, but leadership is all about development. So we train people at their jobs, we develop people at leadership, and we have to choose our words wisely, and we have to set up programs that are reflective of that. When I was on the rifle range for rifle training, I wasn't necessarily being taught leadership development on the range. And so I think that a lot of leaders, they to their own detriment, they cross-pollinate some of these things, or they use the words interchangeably. We're going to train our leaders. Well, you should train them at their jobs. You should develop them to think and act like a leader. And so I think that there's a deeper dive that leaders can take. And to your point, Morgan, I think leaders, there's a magic word that I have in leadership, and it's seek. I don't think enough leaders are seeking out how to be better leaders. They're waiting for the answer to fall in their laps. And if the company doesn't develop me, well, they just didn't develop me. As leaders, with leadership being the people side of the business, any business, regardless of industry, we have to seek things out. We have to seek ways to become better. But I think I'll throw this idea out at you, because I love this idea, because I'm a storyteller by nature. So I think there's a lot of canned leadership tactics. Okay, what do I mean by that? When I grew up, my mom made canned asparagus. Have you ever had those canned asparagus?
No, that sounds terrible.
It's terrible, but when that's all you know, right? Oh, they're mushy. It's like a paste. But anyways, when you grow up on it, that's all you know. And I liked it. That's what I knew for asparagus. When I got older, I went to somebody's house and they served asparagus, and it was fresh, just like grilled asparagus. And I'm like, what is that? Once I tasted it, I never went back to canned.
Right.
So what we do is we bring a very fresh, natural approach to leadership so that the canned, generic leadership styles and tactics can go out the door. And once they're exposed to it, then they switch over right away, because there is a better way. And we don't want to be generic as a leader, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have to be individualistic to an extent where you have
And
a
authentic.
yeah,
Yeah. We have to be
yeah,
authentic.
original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It makes me think of something that Morgan and I have talked about before on our episodes and just outside of this, and something that I heard you say in our session earlier this week, or last week. It was last week. And gosh, no, it was this week. Oh my gosh, Erik, the time
Time
flies.
flies when you're
Anyway,
having fun.
oh my gosh. But this idea of there's management, right? And there's leadership, and we manage things and we lead people. And I think that is another kind of explanation for why training and development are different.
Mhm.
Do you have
100%.
any thoughts on that?
I think that we have to be very clear on what words we choose to use and when we choose to use them as leaders. If I were to ask you both, are words important? You'd probably say
Yeah.
yes. And words have meaning and words are interpreted. So it's very much when somebody says to me, I'm having trouble managing my people, I already know where the problem is. I already know that they should be leading them, but they don't understand that. So they think they should lead projects the same way they lead people. That they should lead or they should manage inventory, manage tasks, manage goals, and manage people. Well, it's two different realms there. So we want to, like you said, Elizabeth, we want to manage stuff, projects, inventory, goals, whatever we want to manage. And then we want to lead people. We want to coach them, inspire them, engage them, bring out the best in them. And that's why, just like training and development, leading and managing, a lot of these things are opposites, but it's like yin and yang. They work together. Sometimes opposites are required for balance. And so you can't say, well, I just lead people, but I'm not managing these projects anymore, because then that'll fall apart. So I believe that if we have management in our title, maybe a shift manager, vault manager, or that was a vault manager, but in the film industry, but whatever, you're a sales manager, you should be wrapped in leadership. So you could be a manager of the stuff, but a leader of people, because nobody wants to be managed, not when leadership's available. Nobody wants to be micromanaged, macromanaged, or even properly managed when they could follow a leader. Given the choice, they want leadership.
Yeah, the way that Elizabeth and I have talked about it, and the way that a lot of psychological principles talk about it, is there's successful leadership, and that's managing the people's day to day. But then there's effective leadership, and that's making people be the best they can be. So it's the separation between management and leadership there, truly. And one way I see it applied constantly, or misapplied technically, is communication. So there's the communication of projects and the communication of direction to do projects. And then there's the communication of the people portion of it. Are they going to comprehend these instructions? Are they going to be able to follow through without me checking in? Or am I going to have to check in? And that's leading the person to be the most successful they can be in the project given to them. So there's a separation between here's the project and here's how I want you to work on the project. Right.
And I think you summed it up brilliantly. And I think that for me, I'll go back to some military roots on that. And there's the project, here's your orders. And then there's the intent, here's the way it should be done, right? If people don't understand, okay, what they would call it in the military was commander's intent. So if Elizabeth is my commander and gives me an order, I would have a hard time executing the order if I don't understand her intent, because the likelihood of a variable coming up is 100%. Something's going to come up that if I just follow her orders but didn't hit her intent, we had a missed opportunity. So what I've done is I've translated commander's intent very simply into leader's intent. If she gives me a project, I still have to understand her intent, or I really can't execute it the way she's thinking about it, her intention. So orders are one thing, intentions are everything. And so, yes. And that's why words are so important. Most leaders don't speak leadership. They speak their industry because they manage stuff. So if you're in Starbucks, right, you speak coffee, you're a barista, you speak lattes and mochas and grounds and whatever. Most people speak their industry. They just don't speak leadership. And that's why they don't get leadership results. They tend to get product results.
Yeah.
So once we speak those words, like you're saying, speak it fluently, and people start to adapt to it. And then they start becoming, leaders, even if nobody's reporting into them. They can still think and act like a leader. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, there's a subliminal wording behind when you're
Sure.
announcing a project. There's a subliminal leadership wording behind that talks about intent exactly. I find it hilarious that I think almost every podcast we bring up coffee in some way, shape, or form.
do.
This time it was you, Erik. So that's really that's hilarious to me.
Well, you can't start your day without it. I mean, really.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
totally fair. Yeah.
I love Starbucks. I love cappuccinos. So those baristas
Same.
do a great job.
I
But
travel a lot, and there's usually a Starbucks
Mhm.
somewhere, so I'm good to go.
yes,
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, that's New England. We're really about Dunkin' around here, but I still look for those Starbucks.
There you go. Hey, a lot
yeah.
of airports have Dunkin', so that works out good.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
But no, what you're saying is, that communication of intent, I really feel there's a subliminal wording of leadership behind a lot of the instructions given. So in that way, there's a crossover between training and development, but the development still has to be very intentional, separate from the training. So Erik, you mentioned, they talked about skills that you need for leadership, and they talked about it over and over, despite you being maybe at the shooting range training there. You were also having this subliminal thought process of leadership skills integrated to that, but then you also need the development separate from it. But I love the idea of subliminally there should be leadership conversation in regular training matters too.
100%.
Mhm.
Because I mean, you've probably heard people say, let's say they're frustrated with their team members, right? So you have somebody in a leadership position, and they're frustrated with a team member. They're not doing what they should be doing. Their performance isn't there. Maybe they're lacking tact or whatever the case is. And sometimes, or they just don't get the work done. Like they know what to do. And then leaders will say things like, I wish I could just train on common sense. Remember, you ever heard that one?
Oh,
Yes.
And I always tell the leaders when they share that with me, I said, you don't need to train them on common sense. You've already trained them to do their job. They're not doing it because they're not focused on development. They've been developed to think and act like a leader.
Mhm.
I was trained as an air traffic controller, developed as a leader. So when I went up there, I took the actions I was trained on because leadership was a higher calling
Mhm.
than the job skills. So I was a leader first, then an air traffic controller. So as a leader, even though nobody reported into me, as a leader, I did what I was trained to do. I didn't come up with excuses. I didn't just not do it. Most people know what to do. They don't do it. It's not a training issue. It's a development issue. They're not thinking and acting like leaders. And once we can unlock that in them, their productivity skyrockets.
Yeah. Yes, that's so important. So in the motivation of like psychology of motivation, there is, the two different types of workers. There's the X worker and the Y worker. And you think that everyone's the Y worker, that they're, a natural leader, that they're going to do what they have to do. They have the quote unquote common sense that people say isn't so common. But in reality, a lot of people are that X worker, but they were taught to be that X worker in not leading themselves, in not problem solving themselves, just doing the work and doing, almost the quiet quitting bare minimum type of idea.
Yeah.
But that's because it's been developed in them to act like that since the leadership development never occurred or was never fostered. People naturally want autonomy, and developing leaders is the way in which you develop that autonomy correctly.
Well, when you think about it, if there's a deficiency in something, if there's a gap in something, let's just say development, it'll get filled in. Probably went out with what you want. And
Right.
Leaders have to ensure exemplary performance from their people. And there are so many people well-trained who are negative, well-trained who are disengaged. They're just not developed. And I talk about a concept that I also agree there's two types of people in the workplace. Morgan, I'm glad you brought that up. What I've discovered in the past 30 years, and 10 of it going into hundreds of different businesses, working with tens of thousands of leaders, is in the workplace, whether you have direct reports or not, the entire team. There's two types of people that I've discovered. There's business workers, and those are people that show up to work, and there's business warriors, those that show up to win. And we want to forge more business warriors. Business workers are important. They should get the job done. But what I found is most of your negativity, most of your complacency, most of your mistakes come from business workers. So if we can try and transform people into being more business warriors, which involves leadership development, then we get more wins. And I love wins.
Yes,
Because the opposite of that is you lost. You know what I mean? That's why so many businesses go out of business, is so many businesses don't hit their goals
Right.
because they have business workers, and they're hoping that their workers are trying to accomplish the wins. And
Yes.
it's the same thing. We have people who haven't developed as leaders, but we're expecting them to act like one. you
Right.
know?
Yeah,
So
exactly. It's so important,
we
especially
have to be
if
very
you have,
intentional.
yeah, if you want people in management positions that are going to lead their teams effectively, then you need to make sure you're developing a leader. I feel like we've talked a lot on, the management side of developing
Yeah.
leaders, developing motivated workers. But have you had experience, Eric, with anybody that, they aren't in necessarily a management or leadership type position and they haven't been developed as leader, but they clearly want to? Have you
Yeah.
ever talked with anybody and approached or helped them approach maybe their manager or
Yeah.
the company about development?
Yeah, and it happens a lot in the course that I conduct. In fact, in the course that Elizabeth, in the Leadership Link, there are many people that find deficiencies. We already know the deficiencies in our leaders, right? So if you report into somebody, you know their strengths and weaknesses. You know where they're strong. You know where they're lacking.
Mhm.
Proper leadership development allows you to lead up, and yes, you can lead up, and you got to use tact. So if I reported into you, Morgan, and I found out that your communication is a little bit off and negatively impacting the team, I wouldn't say to you, hey boss, I think your leadership sucks, your communication is horrible. I would probably use tact, because I've been developed as a leader, and say, hey, Morgan, can I share something with you? I know how important teamwork is to you. Here's an observation I've made. When you say this, it tends to push people away, and I know you're not intending that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that there are many people that the entire military, all 2 million people are being developed that serve, all men and women serving right now that our tax dollars go for, are being developed to think and act like leaders, not just to perform the over 800 job positions that exist. Our tax dollars are paying for that, where we get exemplary service.
Yeah.
But in the workplace, we go, well, we got an okay training program. And we
Right.
leave it at that.
Right.
Or you know what? It's trial by fire. Sink or swim. We throw it against a wall and see what sticks. Right after they tell me that people are their greatest asset. And so you find a misalignment with what they're saying and what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And you find that most leaders, when they're not developed, they're actually filling a position of leadership, but they're not fulfilling a purpose of leadership. But if you ask them the purpose of leadership, they don't know because they haven't been taught.
Right.
They have a title, but they don't blaze a trail, right? They're just, here's my title.
Mhm.
But titles don't make anyone a leader. It just means you have a title.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
and I believe titles are extremely important when they're earned, never given, right? Titles are important because it's a form of identity. Identity is critical, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
we're not developing them, what it means, then it means nothing.
Yeah.
One thing I do internally is, I tell people you can't expect to get a supervisory position if you haven't gone through the development portion of leadership yet. And so we oftentimes have people go through leadership development years ahead of when they're going to get a supervisory position where we know they're going to get it. And that's because we need to make sure that they're able to utilize this development that we've given them in real life situations to see that they in fact have earned this position of promotion.
You want to teach your kids how to drive before they go for the test.
Yes,
It
absolutely.
just makes sense. In other words, we want to teach people how to lead before they have followers. It just makes sense. But in the business sector, it's very much like, hey, we had a leader leave. Elizabeth, you want an extra $1 an hour to lead these people who yesterday were your friends? Sure. And we're not going to develop you. It should work out fine. That's the scenario in business 90% of the times. When you say it out loud, it doesn't make any sense. You got to use the audio test. Say it out loud. Does it make sense? And most of the leadership lack of development is happening. The tactics they're using to promote a leader right now, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even make any sense. They're not talking about it on onboarding. There's so many things that when you say it out loud, you're like, whoa, that makes zero sense.
I love that. That's a good call out, because you're right. And that's, I mean, I've worked internally in organizations, and that has been the case a lot of the time. They kind of, when they're looking to fill a position, a leadership position, it's okay, who's the top performer, or who has the most knowledge. And it's like, well, yeah, that's important, and there's more to it. It's the and that's there, and it happens so often.
You're right, Elizabeth, you're 100% right. It's going to come back to our words. I feel that most leadership promotions happen based on somebody being available, not capable.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
leaders have to select the words that are going to define the results. That's it. Are you okay? How many leaders have you ever heard say this? I'm just looking for a warm body.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. You're going to get a business worker, and maybe not a good one.
Yeah.
But if you hear leaders saying, I'm looking for the next generation of people to carry on the legacy and the heritage and our identity of our company. Okay, well, that's different.
Yeah.
It's going to take you a little bit of time, but you're going to get a better person. Or I'm looking for the next leader to guide our people, to enhance their performance and accelerate their results and create empowerment. That's so different than a warm body.
And it
Yeah.
feels different, right? Like just even
You got to get
saying
excited
that
about it.
right now, it's like, yeah, I
Definitely.
want to be that person. I want to bring that legacy forward.
How do
you
I
know?
earn
And
that?
so different, like just the experience of it is. And
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question, because I know that you have a book that was recently released, your 8th book, Unleash Your Business Warrior, which is
Yes.
kind of, you know, where we're talking about. So I think it's a good segue into why now? Why did you write this book now, and what's it about?
So I appreciate, and I actually have here is what it looks like. So I know on the publisher site it says pre-orders, but they do exist.
I'm gonna order mine today. Now I know where to get it.
I know. You know a guy.
I know a guy.
You got to know a guy. So Unleash Your Business Warrior, and then the tagline is Military Tactics for Business Victories. So over the last 10 years plus of coaching businesses, I found myself sharing little tactics. And then I would backtrack. I'm like, well, I got that one from the military. And people would say, ooh, I love that one. And here's a popular one, and everybody's heard it, but it's a tactic on fixing attendance issues, which is ironic that I share this with you today, because I, Erik Therwanger, United States Marine veteran, was late to this podcast.
Hey, you're taking accountability. That's a leadership.
I did call in. I know. I got it. I'm like, oh my gosh, my ThinkGREAT colleagues are going to be like, oh, he was late. We're going to never let him forget it. But I did call before the podcast, so technically I wasn't late because I took responsibility. Okay. So here's one that I've shared for a long time, because a lot of organizations have attendance issues, right? You got the same person being 10 minutes late every day, even though the shift starts at this point. And in the military, they would share with us, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. And so they had a saying for the performance they expected. And so that being late was it was not tolerated. So here was our flaw. So they name it. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So everybody's 15 minutes early. Except for this Marine today. But my point is there you have 2 million people showing up on time. And I'm not saying somebody doesn't get in a car accident or car issues or family problems, but you call in, you take responsibility. So there's little things like that. Also just being, I have it in the book, being squared away. Now, I don't go into businesses and say, you need to be squared away. That's a little militaristic in its tone. But I translate that into, you should have a tour-ready environment. Your environment should be ready for a tour at any moment. And so there's ways to take the tactics. Now, in my onboarding in boot camp, I got choked out. I got punched. I got called horrible names. You should probably not do that tactic in your onboarding. You might get arrested, certainly fired. But it worked there. But the military tactics that I share are people tactics. They're things that help us perform better. That the military over the last, there'll be 3 of the branches will be 249 years old this year, 1 year older than our country. They've been around a long time.
Yeah, funny enough, Erik, I'm hoping to run Marine Corps Marathon next year for the 250th.
Hoorah. Oh, I know. I'm so excited for the 250. I mean, this is big.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure it's the 50th for Marine Corps Marathon and 250th anniversary for Marine Corps.
The Marines get excited. We get excited about our birthday every year, November 10th. But 250, we're excited about it. But I think that you've got to give some names that people can latch onto. So we have a lot of clients that in their job descriptions for their people, it says maintain a tour-ready appearance in your department or in your location. And it gives them the mindset of it. Because the military, a lot of it's mindset. And so we take these tactics and apply it. So if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. Be squared away or be tour ready. And there's always things we could go back to. The military is really brilliant at that part, giving you a saying that guides your performance. You go, okay, I gotta apply to that. In the corporate America world, we have very little sayings for leaders to exude exemplary performance from their people. We just hope they do it, or it's we say things like, I need this yesterday, or get this for me stat. And it's like, oh, that's not very empowering.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, be late or I'll warn you don't be late or I'll warn you for the 47th time.
Yeah.
So, and in most organizations, leadership is just off a little bit. We just need to do some minor adjustments. And it's minor tactics, major business victories. It's just little things.
It's subliminal expectation building. So communicating those expectations. One thing I talked to my team about where I work internally is, you got to hit things head on. So if someone's not following attendance, they're being late, you got to figure it out. You need to build ownership in them where they want to be here on time, not just warn them because they're late, in a sense, because that's not going to do anything. If you're just doing a slap on the wrist over and over and over again, they're never really getting consequences. But if you can build ownership in that person, it's going to be more effective. I mean, it's funny that you talk about job descriptions, because our IO psychology professional behind the scenes here, observing right now, him and I are working on job descriptions at one of my companies, and we're talking about, the 5-star profile, the expectations-based profile, and leadership is always incorporated in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. The way we talk is going to dictate the outcomes. And you said, one word you said there is so important. There's so many leaders out there, especially business owners, that they really want their teams to have an ownership mindset. They'll say that a lot, but they never define what it is. So I always ask business leaders, I'll say, what is it that you want more of from your people? And they'll say, well, I want them to have more of an ownership mindset. And I said, what do you want them to own? I said, you mean you're going to give them an equity share in the company? No. I said, what do you want them to own? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, no, what do you mean? You have to explain it to them. And so on that note, here's what I always share. This would be great for your listeners. I always share, if we're going to have people have an ownership mindset, you have to teach them to own the outcomes of everything that they do, the outcomes of this project, the outcomes of this goal, the outcomes of this workflow, the outcomes of customer experience. We say so many things as leaders that don't make any sense. We need to raise the bar. What bar? I don't know. We need to be on the same page. Same page of what? I don't know. We need an ownership mindset. What do you want them to own? I don't know. We have canned, cliched leadership out there, and you get canned, cliched results. So when I say raise the bar, I say you need to raise your leadership bar and raise it to this level of communication here, raise it to this level of performance. When I say get on the same page, I'm talking either the same page of the book you're reading, the same page of your plan. People need to know how. Most leaders aren't teaching how. Leaders have to fall in love with the how. It doesn't matter how strong your why is. Your why is one of many things. If you don't know how to get to your why is just a pipe dream. Why is important, but it's not everything. If I say my why, the purpose that I'm doing Think Great is for this, and people say, well, how do you do it? And I said, I don't know. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have to tell them why you're doing it. You have to tell them how to do it. You have to tell them what to do. You have to tell them when to do it, timelines. You have to tell them who it impacts, all the who, what, when, where, how, and why. You can't go, well, I just don't like that one. I'll take the how and all.
Yeah.
Well,
part of the
very intentional.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Morgan. I was gonna say that just goes back to that intention, right? And helping them understand the intention behind it, because
exactly.
I mean, it's the thing that just gets me in this conversation right now is that it seems so simple, and yet it is so complex. It just in my head, I'm like, yeah, I get it. If you ask me, why do you run your business, and I can't answer that question, that's a problem. Or
because all of those things are important. All of them. No, you're right. The intentionality of leadership is very important. We have to be intentional leaders, and it's the development process. It starts with planting seeds, and then we have to cultivate that and grow as leaders, so that any situation that comes up, are we doing what a leader would do? That's the big question. Too many people just have the knee-jerk reactions or comments, and then it's like, would a leader have done that? Would a leader really say that? And we have to have some time And we have to be able to go to something bigger than ourselves and go, did I exhibit tact right there? Or was I decisive? So we have to have leadership tools in our toolbox. Otherwise, we're building it by hand. And most leaders don't have the leadership solutions. They just said, well, here's how it's worked. Now, I know it's not right, but it's all I got. So yeah, it's really about sharpening the blade. Most leaders are just leadership butter knives. They just spread things around. They're dull as leaders. Great people, experienced in their industry. They just don't know leadership because we've ignored that part.
Yeah.
Right.
You have the best widget maker. They know all about the widget. Woohoo! They can sell the widget. They can make the widget. What about people? Don't know anything about developing people.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we put them in a leadership role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the metaphors, Erik, by the way.
Well,
But I mean, you
'cause
talk.
you got to get them thinking. They got to connect it with the story,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but you talk about the leadership toolbox, and leadership toolboxes are so important. They're the development programs that are out there, and to an extent, it can be as simplified as a RACI matrix. The responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed matrix it really builds the intentions behind of a position or a task or responsibility at the workplace. One thing, though, that this conversation is really kind of making me think of is, as you said, Elizabeth, it can be very complex, the development of leadership. And that's because every single person is an individual. They're all rather different from one another. They have different personalities. They have different natural skill sets. They have different strengths in their skills. And so I think that's what makes it so complex in leadership development is, you have to apply leadership development to each person. It needs to, in a sense, be personalized, despite a blueprint for the development in general.
Can I add to that, Morgan?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So here, here's in an organization, if you have a team, then that means you have some common ground. If leaders aren't finding common ground with people of diverse backgrounds and ideologies, you don't have a team, you have a group.
Yes.
So you need to help people personally with a foundation of common leadership elements. This is where most leaders go wrong. I believe that leadership is extremely simple, not easy. I also believe that leaders have to take the complex and make it simple.
Yes.
There's too many leaders that make things harder than it needs to be. And here's what I would say. I believe that leaders have to stand on leadership truths. So let's just say we have a company, and let's just say, Elizabeth, you own the company and we report into you. And I believe most organizations need to establish leadership truths for their company. Say, here we believe this. So let's just say Elizabeth says, all right, here's our leadership truths. People are our greatest asset. Leaders accomplish things through the efforts of others, and we hire better than us. Okay, just those three. There's dozens of them, but those three. If I say, well, I'm not delegating something out because it's better if I do it, I'm not delegating it to my team, I just violated a leadership truth.
Right.
You can have all the individuals you want on your team, but you, as a leader, if you don't know how to unify them, you don't have a team. So in the Marine Corps, there were 14 leadership traits. All different personalities had to accept those 14 leadership traits. All different personalities had to accept the 11 leadership principles, the definition of leadership, the general orders, all that. You had to accept the common ground. If I didn't, if I'm like, I don't believe in that, I shouldn't be in the Marine Corps.
Right.
Organizations, that's why we have mission, vision, core values, brand promises, statement, all these things. Like, let's just say you have core values. The Marines are honor, courage, and commitment, right? And I'm like, I don't want to have honor. I shouldn't be in that organization. It doesn't matter what type of person I am. If I say I disagree with all of that, a foolish leader says, yeah, keep being in the company.
Yeah, that's
it's like, yeah, you've got to have some foundational things we can stand on as leaders, or we fall through.
Yeah, I talk about that all the time. I mean, the way to build organizational commitment, even not even talking about leadership, but the way to build organizational commitment and know someone's going to be with your company long term is to have matching foundational principles. Same thing for building followership. If you're a leader and you want to build followership, whether you be a manager at a company, leading some sort of charitable group, being a politician, anything like that, to build followership, you need to have matching ideals, values, potentially even traits. behind it. But you talk about mission and vision, and I know Elizabeth, she's huge on mission and vision. She actually was just developing one of her own mission statements recently, which I was glad to be a part of. But Elizabeth, talk to us a little bit more about mission and vision and any questions you might have for Erik.
Yeah, actually, I have a question, and I full disclosure, I definitely gave Erik a little bit of a heads up because it was something that I left our class this month and thought about. I mean, and so before I say that, I do want to say, I think kind of on the topic before that, what I'm hearing you say, like a theme, is that there's part of being a leader is reflecting on how you act. So keeping those core, those core values, or kind of the different attributes, and being able to say, this situation, did I exhibit tact? Did I exhibit this? And if not, what can I do differently? And so I just want to call that out for listeners, because I think that reflection is so vital in helping us grow as leaders. And it's a way for us as leaders to be able to model what we want to see in others, right? And so I just want to first off say that, because I think that's so important. And I tend to reflect a lot, clearly. But one of the things you said in class the other day was, we were talking about missions and visions, right? And I know that ThinkGREAT, your company, you have a really strong mission and a strong vision. But something that's unique and different about ThinkGREAT from a lot of other organizations, I would say most other organizations, is you have something called a crusade, right? So you have your mission, your vision, your values, and your crusade. So I'm curious from you, can you tell us what you mean by crusade, why it's important? And because I'm really curious, and I think our listeners might be too, what's the crusade of ThinkGREAT?
So it's a fantastic question, because I believe that our identity in an organization is a combination of many things. It's who we are. If your listeners are thinking about this right now, the company that they work in likely has competition. The competition probably does what they do, even though they do it the best, right? Okay. So if competition means we do the product or service similar, minus workflow and tweaks, what really separates us as an organization is our people. And what gives our people identity is our mission, our vision, our core values, our mottos, our taglines, the things that say, here's who we are. Because the most powerful factor in a business is the who, because they already told me the most important asset is people. So who becomes their guiding force. So a mission statement is, when we borrow this from the military, right? They have mission. We want to accomplish that. So we have a mission statement. The mission is what we're supposed to do every day. So at ThinkGREAT, we want to create a wave of dynamic thinking every day. Our vision is who we're going to become. We want to lead the worldwide people movement. And worldwide is very important there. It gives us purpose. So everything that we're doing to expand beyond the United States is part of our vision. That includes putting things into other languages, which some of our leadership content has already started being translated into Spanish. Part of it. Our core values are passion, integrity, and excellence. So we hire people with passion, integrity, excellence. We maintain people with that because we want to hire to our culture, right? Hire to our identity. But what I've discovered is if you really study human beings, they'll do anything for a crusade. A crusade is what really touches their soul. And as leaders, if we can touch the souls of our people, we can move our people. So we had a crusade when the pandemic broke out, and it was to share the cure for social distancing. So we had a mission, we had a vision, but the crusade there was a moment at hand where social creatures had been socially distanced. We had a crusade to unify people. It was so needed. So we held events. It was kind of like a speakeasy of events. You had to know the code to get in, but you could come and be social. We allowed it. But in the last 6 months, we've updated our crusade. And so now we have a crusade that we want to create a global team of great thinkers. This is a team. So we want a coaching program out there, this team of global thinkers who enrich the lives of people at work, at home, and in their communities. So we're on a crusade to find people who want us to help us to share the mission and the vision and the core values. So that for us is an evolution where we're looking to build, and Elizabeth, you and I have talked about this over, of course, a cup of coffee, about building people that want to be on that crusade. Because I think that, Your mission should move people. Your vision should move people. A crusade should move people. I think the biggest problem in businesses is those that have mission, vision, core values, the big three, right? Most of their people don't know what they are. So they can't live them. So we as a company have just decided we always want to have a crusade that we're on, something that has a deeper meaning that touches our soul. And to me, I would love to create a whole team of great thinkers globally that are out there sharing our message.
Yeah.
Thanks for allowing me to share that, because I just got myself even super fired up.
I know, I love it. And it's so aligned to, I should just have like a bell or something that rings when I
say
use
that.
it.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's aligned very much, I think, with what Morgan and I are trying to do with this podcast, right? This podcast really it's educational to get people to think and reflect and just kind of engage in the world in a way that they haven't engaged before. And I think I love the idea of a crusade. So I'm thinking now, Morgan, we need to have a crusade as well.
I think we're gonna have to develop one.
You're gonna have a crusade, and you can feel that you're on it. You can feel when people aren't on one.
Right. Right.
Yes, we definitely can. And I mean, part of Elizabeth and my mission is, we want people to be curious, just like you say that people need to seek out leadership development. You also need to be curious. You need to be curious in learning, be that sponge of knowledge. Don't just, collect the knowledge, but you should also be seeking it, as you stated, Erik. So we really appreciate you being on our podcast today. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we log off?
I think I love the fact that you're going to add a crusade or potentially consider a crusade. I would say for anyone listening right now, everyone can be, we're a learned creature as humans. It's what separates us from the animals. If you look up the definition of instinct, it is a shared behavior among all members of a species. So I'll share this, and this will give you hope. And this will allow you to know why I believe in inclusive leadership. If you were to take an egg out of a bird nest and raise that bird in a lab, and then release that bird who's never met another bird, that bird will know how to make a nest. Humans have, and I learned this in a college course on psychology. According to the definition of instinct, the shared behavior, it's done the same all the time. Humans have no instincts. This is a very tough concept for people to say, because they've always said, I did it instinctually. Well, we can be taught leadership because we're a learned creature. Now, I could be taught basketball. It doesn't mean I'm going to be the center for the Minnesota Timberwolves because I'm not 7 foot, so I'm not getting it, but I can learn. But my point is that every single person listening has the capacity to learn more about leadership, because leadership is not an instinct.
Yes.
Some people are more determined to do it, have a desire to do it. Some people have grown up in an environment of leadership and they're like, I love this. Some people it's foreign to, but anyone right now can flip the switch and say, I want to become a better leader, and they can.
Yeah, I definitely feel that there's a huge focus on, as you say, determination. If you set a goal, you can probably meet that goal to the physical limitations you have. And to an extent, I mean, I love the great man theory of leadership. I really do. But you bring up the nature nurture argument. Maybe that nurturing for the great man theory is actually early on in life. So, again, to our listeners, I challenge you to continue researching the skills-based theory of leadership versus that great man theory of leadership. And, maybe there's a neurological perspective, neurobiology to leadership as well. Perhaps that's part of someone's success in leadership, separate from the skills, though skills can certainly be taught.
Well, and the simple definition of leadership, it's the people side of your business.
Right. Yeah.
It's leaders show they care. And we can make it very simple. And the best part about leadership is you can be a better leader on the home front. You can be a better leader in your communities. You can be a better leader in the workplace. And it's not tough to do. You just have to say, here are some concepts of leadership I believe in, and then you can learn those. So, just seek it out. Seek is powerful. And thank you for having me today. I thank you for letting me unleash some thoughts.
Well, we appreciate it very much. And if, I just put a call out there. I am excited to get my book. Again, I know someone who can probably get that from, so I'm excited there. But
and maybe I'll bring a copy to class.
Yeah, right. You have 7 other really great books that I've read and have kind of, again, that sponge idea taken it all in. And I'd encourage people to check them out, or check out Erik's website, ThinkGREAT. We will be posting some links to that on LinkedIn and in social media, so you can check it out. But thank you. I will see you next month, probably before then, for coffee, because we do like our Starbucks. But thank you all for being here and for listening, and thank you, Erik. We appreciate you very much, and what you're doing for the world.
Yeah, it's
great
great
host.
meeting you, Erik.
So much.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, goodbye, listeners. Stay curious.
See you next time. This concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every other Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks, closing today's case.